Iron is the element that kills stars. It is what makes your blood red. It is what turned an entire planet into a monument to its own death. And every civilization that looked at that planet gave it the same meaning. Mars. The Greeks feared him. The Romans built an empire on him. The Norse sacrificed a hand to bind what he unleashed. The Aztecs drank something before battle that they called heart blood. And what it does inside the human body has never been told this way. A company named Mars sells that same compound in candy bars today, from a headquarters in McLean, Virginia. The same suburb as the Central Intelligence Agency. It has never gone public. Its supply chain runs through the hands of children with machetes. The Pentagon has 5 sides and has never passed a financial audit. Lockheed Martin bears the god's name and collects the largest share of the world's largest military budget. Their flagship weapons program will cost more than the GDP of most nations. And the Pentagon itself was built on a number the Kabbalists would recognize. There is a molecule in your blood, and in every green leaf on Earth that shares the same ancient structure. The alchemists called their union a sacred marriage. They described it centuries before anyone had the instruments to see it. This element is inside you right now. It has been inside you since before you were born. It is circulating through your blood as you hear or read this sentence. And there is a reason you can feel it, but cannot name it. There is a reason men are dying in the way they are dying, at the age they are dying. Every ancient culture on Earth built something to prevent it. A forge, a ritual, a container for the fire. But it was dismantled before you were born. What follows are 5 layers: the sky, the blood, the cup, the machine, and the forge. One element, one god. This is Mars. Mars is a corpse. The 4th planet from the Sun once had an ocean. It had a magnetic field. It had an atmosphere thick enough to hold liquid water on its surface, and possibly something like weather. It had all the conditions for life. And then its iron core stopped churning. When the core stopped, the magnetic dynamo that generated Mars's protective field collapsed. Without that field, the solar wind, a stream of charged particles pouring off the sun at 1,000,000 miles per hour, began stripping the atmosphere away, molecule by molecule. The oceans evaporated. The water was either lost to space or locked up in subsurface ice. And the iron that had once circulated through the planet's molten interior, driving that dynamo, oxidized. It rusted. That rust is what makes Mars red. Iron oxide. Iron. The same element that turns blood red when hemoglobin binds oxygen is what turned an entire planet into a monument to its own death. Mars rusted, slowly, silently, over hundreds of millions of years, while the largest volcano in the solar system, Olympus Mons, rising over 21 kilometers above the Martian surface, 2.5 times the height of Everest, sat on its surface doing nothing. The mightiest mountain on a planet that could not protect itself. And there is a canyon on Mars called Valles Marineris, 2,500 miles long, up to 7 miles deep. A wound across the face of the planet that never healed, because there is no tectonic activity to close it. No living geology, just a scar on a dead god. Humanity looked at this planet, this rusted, scarred, lifeless world, and named it after the god of war. Every civilization did. The Greeks called him Ares. He was the son of Zeus and Hera, and his own father despised him. In the Iliad, Zeus tells Ares to his face, "To me you are the most hateful of all the gods who hold Olympus. Forever quarreling is dear to your heart, wars and battles." No other Olympian god receives this kind of direct contempt from the king of the gods. Ares occupies a position in Greek mythology worse than the usual villain. He is an embarrassment. When the mortal hero Diomedes wounds Ares on the battlefield at Troy, a human drawing blood from a god, Ares screams. Homer says his scream was like that of 9,000 or 10,000 warriors crying out in battle at once. And then Ares does what no self-respecting war god should ever do. He runs, he flees the battlefield, trails back to Olympus and complains to his father. Zeus tells him to sit down. This is the Greek god of war. Blind, stupid violence that screams when it gets hurt and runs to daddy. The Greeks feared Ares the way you fear a natural disaster, with dread, never awe. He represented the ineluctable aspect of war that cannot be ennobled, the blood and the screaming and the guts on the ground. The Greeks preferred Athena, born from Zeus's own head, fully armored, the goddess of strategic warfare. When Ares and Athena meet on the battlefield at Troy, Athena wins. She beats the god of war with a rock. The message is clear. Strategy defeats brute force. Intelligence overcomes aggression. The Greeks looked at the reality of combat, the chaos, the terror, and the blind red rage and said, "That is Ares," and he loses. Even the Spartans, the most martial culture in the Greek world, understood this. They kept a chained statue of Ares in a temple, so his violent spirit could not escape the city, according to Pausanias. And when Spartan generals won a battle through superior tactics, they sacrificed a bull to Ares, the greater offering. When they won through brute force in open combat, they offered a rooster, the lesser offering. Because even in Sparta, making your leaders habitually not merely fighters but tacticians mattered more than raw destruction, as Plutarch writes in Instituta Laconica. They also built a shrine to Phobos, the god of fear itself. They built it to confront it, to look directly at the thing that every warrior carries into battle and say, "We see you." And then Rome. The Romans looked at Ares, this screaming, bleeding, despised embarrassment of a god, and saw something entirely different. They renamed him Mars, and they made him the second most important deity in the Roman pantheon, surpassed only by Jupiter. This was a theological revolution. Mars was the father of Romulus and Remus, the divine ancestor of every Roman who ever lived, the god from whom Rome itself descended. Every Roman carried Mars in their blood, mythologically speaking, and Mars was both a war god and an agricultural god, simultaneously. Martius, the month that bears his name, was the month when Roman farmers planted their crops, and Roman soldiers marched to campaign. The same month, the same force. Mars protected the city and provided for its needs. The sword and the plowshare were forged from the same iron, and the Romans saw no contradiction. They saw a unity. The Arval Brethren, one of the oldest priesthoods in Rome, sang hymns to Mars at planting season, to Mars, above Jupiter, above Ceres, goddess of grain, because the force that defends the boundary is the same force that cultivates what grows within it. Protection and agriculture were two expressions of a single divine principle. A farmer clearing land, fighting soil, pulling weeds and building fences. That is Mars. A soldier defending the border so the farmer can work. That is Mars too. The Romans understood that civilization requires force, directed, boundaried force. The kind that builds walls and plows fields and says, "This far and no further." The founding myth tells you everything. Romulus and Remus, twin sons of Mars, raised by a she-wolf. They decide to found a city. They disagree about where to found the city. They consult the gods through the flight of birds. Both claim victory. Romulus marks out his boundary on the Palatine Hill. Remus mocks it. He jumps over the wall to show how meaningless it is. Romulus kills him. Brother kills brother over a boundary line, a wall more sacred than blood. The first act of Roman civilization was fratricide, and the Romans openly told this story, over and over for 2,000 years, because they understood what it meant. Civilization is built on the willingness to enforce a boundary, even at the cost of what you love most. Mars fathered both brothers. Mars is present on both sides of the wall. The force that draws the boundary, the force that tests it, the sword, the contempt, all Mars. Almost every nation-state in history is founded on a version of this myth. Someone drew a line, someone crossed it, someone died, and someone dies, and someone will die. His children tell the rest of the story. Mars and Venus, war and love, iron and copper, the red planet and the morning star produced 4 children, all 4 at once. You met Phobos. Phobos is fear, the kind that makes you run, panic, the root of the English word phobia, the terror that collapses an army's formation and turns soldiers into a stampede. Then Deimos, terror, different from fear. Where Phobos sends you running, Deimos roots you to the ground, the sick weight in your stomach before the thing even happens, the anticipation of destruction that freezes you where you stand. But there is also harmonia, harmony, balance, the reconciliation of opposites, the thing that war and love produce when their union works, and eros, their sun. Love, desire, the force that draws beings together and that overcomes separation and that bridges the gap between self and other. War and love produced fear, terror, harmony and love, all four, inseparable. The harmony comes with the fear, the love comes with the terror. The children of Mars are a complete psychology of what happens when force meets intimacy. Astronomy tells the same story. The two moons of Mars are named Phobos and Deimos. Fear and terror orbit the war god. They are his constant companions. But their orbits tell a story. Phobos orbits so close to Mars that it is spiraling inward. It is falling. In roughly 50 million years, Phobos will crash into the planet or break apart into a ring. Fear is drawn to Mars. Fear falls into Mars. The closer you get to war, the deeper fear pulls you in. Deimos orbits farther out and is slowly drifting away. Terror escapes. Terror creates distance. The dread that precedes violence separates from its source and floats outward into the void. An initiated warrior, someone whose Mars has been forged, shaped and given form, rides Phobos. Uses fear as fuel, lets it spiral inward, draws on its energy, and transforms its gravity into acceleration. An uninitiated warrior, someone whose Mars is raw, unshaped, unforged, is ridden by Phobos. Fear drives the chariot, and the warrior is a passenger. This pattern is universal. In Mesopotamia, Nergal ruled the Red Planet, god of war, plague, death, and the underworld. Mars governs where the dead go. Nergal was the scorching summer sun that destroyed crops at the height of their growth. He was fertility through destruction. Abundance burned to ash, so next year's seeds could take root. The Assyriologists who reconstructed his cult from cuneiform tablets found the same pattern that the Greeks encoded in Ares. A god no one wanted to worship and no one could afford to ignore. In the Shiva Puranas, Mangala is born from grief. After Sati immolated herself at her father's sacrifice, Shiva withdrew into a trance so fierce that a drop of sweat fell from his forehead onto the earth. Where it struck, a red child emerged. The earth herself took the form of a woman and raised him. He became Bhauma, son of Bhumi. He became Mars. Later, the child traveled to Kashi and worshipped the father who had wept him into existence, and Shiva granted him the status of a planet. In Hindu astrology, a person's Manglic status, represented by their relationship to Mars in the natal chart, is still checked before marriage. Mars must be consulted before love can be formalized. Before Venus can do her work, Mars must give permission. In Norse mythology, Tyr was the god who sacrificed his sword hand to bind Fenrir, the wolf fated to swallow the Allfather at the end of the world. Tuesday, Tyr's Day, is Dies Martis in Latin, Mars's Day, and the most martial act in Norse mythology is a sacrifice. Tyr places his hand in the wolf's mouth so the other gods can bind it. He knows the wolf will bite. He does it anyway. He loses his sword hand, the hand that wields the weapon, the hand that makes him a warrior, so that chaos can be contained. The mature warrior binds chaos at the cost of his own capacity for force. In Hindu tradition, Kartikeya, also called Skanda and Murugan, is the war god born to defeat a demon that no other god could stop. The gods needed a son of Shiva to destroy Taraka, and Kalidasa told the story in the 5th century in a poem called Kumarasambhava, the birth of the war god. The child was raised by the Kritikas, the 6 star mothers of the Pleiades, and he grew 6 heads so that each could nurse him. He commands the army of the gods. He is eternally youthful, perpetually at the peak of martial power. Mars's total awareness, 6 heads seeing every angle, a long way from Ares screaming on the ground with 1 wound. Every civilization that looked at the red planet assigned it the same portfolio. War, iron, blood. Tuesday, the color red, courage and aggression, the force that destroys a city and the force that founds one, a dead planet and an immortal god. These traditions emerged from cultures separated by oceans and millennia. Whether any thread of contact existed between the Old World civilizations is debated. What is not debated is that Mesoamerica and the rest of the ancient world developed their mythologies in isolation from each other. And yet every culture that watched the red point cross the sky arrived at the same conclusion. Something in the human psyche recognizes what Mars represents before anyone names it. Remember the dead planet. The iron core stopped churning. The magnetic field collapsed. Atmosphere stripped away. Oceans evaporated. Surface oxidized. Mars rusted to death. The iron is still there. It still makes the surface red, but it is dead iron, oxidized, used up, bound to oxygen so completely that it can never flow again, never generate a field, and never protect anything. The same iron, the same element. In one state, it generates the dynamo that sustains a planet's atmosphere, its oceans, and its possibility for life. In another state, oxidized, unmoving, static, it is the color of a corpse. Hold that image. We are going to need it. Hydrogen, helium, and a trace of lithium came from the Big Bang. Everything heavier was forged inside a star. Let's talk about nuclear physics. Stars are fusion reactors. They crush lighter elements into heavier ones. Hydrogen into helium, helium into carbon, carbon into neon, neon into oxygen, oxygen into silicon. Each stage releasing energy that keeps the star burning. The star lives because fusion gives more than it takes. Every reaction produces a surplus. The star spends that surplus to stay alive. Until iron. Iron sits at the peak of the binding energy curve. When a star fuses silicon into iron, the energy yield drops to almost nothing. And beyond iron, fusion no longer gives, it takes. When iron accumulates in the core, when there is nothing left to fuse that produces energy, the outward pressure that held the star open against its own gravity disappears. In a fraction of a second, the core collapses. The outer layers, no longer supported, fall inward at 70,000 kilometers per second, and then rebound outward in a supernova, one of the most violent events in the universe. The star explodes. It dies. Iron is the element that kills stars. It kills them by refusing to give, by being the thing that fusion cannot profit from. The star reaches iron and discovers it has nothing left. And then, that iron, scattered across light years by the explosion, drifts through space. It coalesces into dust clouds, into asteroids, into planets, into a red planet whose molten heart will one day cool and fall silent. And into you. Before humans ever smelted iron from ore, they found it falling from the sky. Meteorites, rocks that survived the burning passage through Earth's atmosphere and landed heavy and strange in fields and deserts and riverbanks. Many of them were iron-nickel alloys, fragments of shattered protoplanetary cores, material from the deep interior of worlds that never finished forming. Extraterrestrial iron, metal that had never been part of Earth's geology. The Egyptians called it Bia and Pet, metal from heaven. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, he found a dagger on the boy king's body, gold handle, crystal pommel, and an iron blade that had not rusted in over 3,000 years. In 2016, a team led by Daniela Comelli used X-ray fluorescence spectrometry to analyze the blade's composition. It contained nickel and cobalt in a ratio that matched iron meteorites exactly. The pharaoh was buried with a blade forged from metal that fell from the sky. Others found the same metal from the same sky. The Inuit of Greenland used fragments from the Cape York meteorite, one of the largest ever found, 58 tons of iron nickel, to make tools and weapons for centuries. The Hittites, who built one of the great empires of the Bronze Age, may have derived their earliest knowledge of ironworking from meteoritic sources. Before the Iron Age began, before anyone figured out how to extract iron from terrestrial rock, iron was already here. It had arrived from space. Iron was extraterrestrial before it was terrestrial. The first iron humans ever touched came from dead stars, delivered by the same cosmic process that reddened Mars. The metal from heaven, the element that kills gods. That element is inside you right now. Your blood is red because of iron. A functional component, built into the architecture of the molecule that keeps you alive. Hemoglobin, the molecule inside red blood cells that carries oxygen from your lungs to every tissue in your body, is built around iron. Each hemoglobin molecule contains 4 iron atoms, arranged within a structure called a heme group. Each red blood cell contains roughly 270 million hemoglobin molecules. You have approximately 25 trillion red blood cells circulating through your body right now. If you extracted all the iron from your blood and compressed it into a single object, you would get a small nail. A nail's worth of iron, forged in the death of a star, is the only thing standing between you and suffocation. Every breath you take depends on iron atoms binding oxygen in your lungs and releasing it in your tissues. Every cell in your body is fed by Mars's metal. The chemistry goes deeper than nutrition. Testosterone, the hormone governing aggression, muscle development, bone density, red blood cell production, and what we broadly call masculine physiology, directly regulates iron metabolism. A 2014 study published in the American Journal of Physiology found that testosterone enanthate suppressed serum hepcidin by 57%. Hepcidin is the master regulator of iron in the body. It controls ferroportin, the only known iron exporter on cell surfaces. When hepcidin is elevated, iron remains sequestered within cells. When hepcidin is low, iron floods into the bloodstream. Testosterone suppresses hepcidin. Iron floods the blood. The same study, testosterone increased red blood cell count by 9%, hemoglobin by 8%. The body, under testosterone's influence, mobilizes its iron reserves and builds more oxygen carrying capacity. Red blood cells proliferate. Hemoglobin concentrations climb. The entire circulatory system loads up with iron. The system is preparing for something: confrontation, exertion. The moment when muscles demand more oxygen than normal breathing can supply. And the system is reciprocal. Iron deficiency impairs testosterone production. If the body cannot access enough iron, the hormonal cascade that produces testosterone falters. Mars's metal and Mars's hormone form a feedback loop. Each sustains the other. Pull one and the other follows. When your body prepares to fight, when adrenaline floods your system, when your heart rate spikes, when your muscles tense and your pupils dilate, it is testosterone that has already loaded the bloodstream with iron-rich red blood cells. And it is iron that carries the oxygen those muscles will burn through in seconds. The god of war is a biochemical fact inside your body. Hemoglobin carries oxygen in animal blood. Chlorophyll captures light in plant leaves. These are arguably the two most important molecules in the living world. Hemoglobin sustaining animals, chlorophyll sustaining plants, blood red, leaf green. They are nearly identical. Both are built on a porphyrin ring, 4 pyrrole rings arranged in a flat square-like structure. Same architecture, same chemical logic. The primary difference is the atom at the center. Hemoglobin has iron. Chlorophyll has magnesium, Mars and Venus. The red planet and the green world. The molecule that carries oxygen through animal blood and the molecule that produces oxygen from sunlight share the same ancient ring structure at their core, a tetrapyrrole scaffold older than either kingdom of life. Iron is at the center of hemoglobin. Magnesium is at the center of chlorophyll. The core geometry, the ring and the structure are shared. The alchemists called the union of Mars and Venus the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of opposites. The Red King and the White Queen merge into a single androgynous being that transcends duality. But in this conjunctio, the Queen wears green, not Luna's silver, but Venus's copper, not moonlight, but chlorophyll. Working centuries before the electron microscope, without any concept of molecular biology, unable to see porphyrin rings, they described the relationship between iron and the vegetative principle, between blood and the green world, with a precision that molecular biology would confirm 4 centuries later. When the alchemists said that Mars and Venus must unite for the great work to proceed, they were describing what happens in every breath you take. Iron in the blood binds the oxygen that chlorophyll in the leaf released. The Red King inhales what the Green Queen exhales. Neither thrives without the other. And they knew this. How they knew it is a question worth sitting with. There is a moment in every child's life when Mars comes online, physiologically. The sympathetic nervous system, the body's fight-or-flight architecture, activates in response to threat or frustration. Epinephrine and norepinephrine flood the system. Heart rate increases, blood vessels dilate in the muscles and constrict in the gut. Blood pressure spikes, pupils dilate, bronchioles in the lungs open wide. Glucose floods the bloodstream. The entire organism reorganizes itself around a single imperative: act now. A child experiencing this for the first time has no name for it, only a feeling. Heat in the chest, tension in the arms, the jaw tightens, the voice rises. Something in the body says move, push, hit, scream. This is Mars, a biological event before it is ever a concept. And then almost invariably someone says, stop that. Calm down. You're being bad. We don't do that. The child's body is surging with a neurochemical cascade that evolution spent millions of years perfecting for exactly this kind of moment. The moment when an organism must assert itself against its environment, must establish a boundary, must fight. And the most powerful people in that child's world tell them the cascade is wrong, entirely wrong. The message lands as absolute. This thing you feel is the problem. The child learns, cellularly. The HPA axis, the stress response system connecting the hypothalamus, pituitary and adrenal glands, learns to suppress its own activation. The prefrontal cortex overrides the amygdala. The body catches its own fire mid-ignition and smothers it. The sword is drawn and sheathed in the same motion. The body has learned that drawing the sword is itself the threat. This happens thousands of times over years, reinforced by every teacher and parent and peer who communicates the same message. Your Mars is unacceptable. Your fire is the problem. The force that built Rome and carried Tyr's hand into the wolf's mouth and moves oxygen through every cell in your body. Suppress it. The result is a body simultaneously mobilized and frozen. Chronic low-grade sympathetic activation held in check by parasympathetic override. The engine redlining with the brakes locked. Mars on his chariot with the reins pulled so tight the horses tear their own mouths. This has a clinical presentation. Generalized anxiety, hypervigilance with no target, the body scanning for a threat that it has been forbidden to confront. The muscles stay braced, the jaw locks around words never spoken. The gut constricts, as if preparing for combat that never arrives. The nervous system, too activated to sleep and too suppressed to act, suspends the body between mobilization and paralysis. The somatic inventory of unfired Mars reads like a clinical checklist. Tension headaches, bruxism, irritable bowel, and chronic insomnia. And depression. The presence of rage without permission. A warrior frozen mid-draw, held in that position for years, decades, until the muscles that were meant for a single explosive assertion calcify into permanent contraction. Depression is Mars with no outlet, iron that was never forged. And the shadow. When Mars cannot express directly, he expresses through the back door. The psyche leaks. It inverts. It finds channels the conscious mind cannot monitor. Passive aggression. The sword wielded with plausible deniability. I'm not angry. I just forgot. I didn't mean it that way. The blade always lands. The hand always has an alibi. Projection. Seeing enemies everywhere. The person who cannot own their aggression perceives the world as aggressive toward them. Conversations become attacks. Disagreements become existential threats. The Mars energy that cannot be acknowledged within gets perceived as coming from without. Moral superiority. I'm not like those aggressive people. Niceness as armor, compassion as a weapon. The person who has suppressed their Mars so completely that they have identified with its opposite, and now wield gentleness with the same territorial ferocity that a healthy Mars would wield a sword. And the body, always the body. The soma holds what the psyche will not. Chronic pain with no structural cause, the immune system attacking the body's own tissues, inflammatory responses that persist without infection. The immune system is Mars at the cellular level. It identifies threats, mobilizes force, and destroys invaders. When Mars cannot be directed outward, when the organism has learned that its own defensive capacity is the enemy, Mars turns inward. The body attacks itself. Autoimmune disease is Golachab at the biological level. We will talk about Golachab soon. Hold that word. We are going to need it too. Remember the dead planet. The iron core stopped churning. Everything rusted. But the iron is still there, still makes the surface red. Your iron is still there too. Forged in stellar death. Fallen from heaven as meteorites. Governed by testosterone. Carrying oxygen to every cell in your body right now, as you take this breath, and the next one, and the next. The same element, the same Mars. One question remains from this layer, and it is the question the Aztecs answered with blood. What happens when you feed Mars to Mars? The Aztecs answered the question with a drink. They called it cacahuatl. The raw material came from the Theobroma cacao tree, a name Linnaeus gave it in 1753, from the Greek theos, God, and broma, food. Food of the gods. Linnaeus knew what the Mesoamericans had known for at least 3,000 years before him. Cacao occupied a singular position in Mesoamerican cosmology. In the Codex Fejevari Maya, one of the few pre-Columbian manuscripts to survive the Spanish destruction, Cacao is the tree of the south, the directional tree flanked by Mictlantecutli, the lord of the dead. In the Madrid Codex, 4 gods pierce their own earlobes and shower cacao pods with their blood. In the Nahuatl song to Otontecutli, the cacao pod is named as the heart of the sacrificial victim. Aztec poets called it by a difrasismo, 2 words that together reveal a deeper meaning. Yolotl, Estli, heart, blood. The drink itself was prepared with water, sometimes with chili, sometimes with other additives, and it was red. Frothy, bitter, and red. The preparation mattered, the pouring mattered. The froth, which they raised by pouring the liquid from a height, was considered the most potent part. The soul of the drink lived in the foam. The warriors drank it before killing. Before battle, Aztec warriors drank cacao. Motecuzoma's sumptuary laws forbade anyone who had not gone to war from drinking cacao, even the son of a king. Ground cacao made into wafers was issued to every soldier on campaign as part of military rations. The Florentine Codex records that cacao gladdens one, refreshes one, consoles one, invigorates one. Warriors drank the blood of the gods before going to make blood of their own. Eric Thompson, one of the foremost Mesoamerican scholars of the 20th century, described the relationship in a single sentence. Both were the repositories of precious liquids, blood and chocolate. The Aztecs understood what their bodies already knew. Theobromine, the primary active alkaloid in cacao, a methylxanthin structurally similar to caffeine, named after the tree that produces it. Theobromine does something specific to the cardiovascular system. It dilates blood vessels. Where caffeine primarily stimulates the central nervous system, theobromine works on smooth muscle. It opens the arteries. It increases blood flow. It reduces vascular resistance. Blood flows faster with less friction. And it does something else. Theobromine inhibits phosphodiesterase, the enzyme that breaks down cyclic AMP, the primary signaling molecule for testosterone production in Leydig cells. When you inhibit phosphodiesterase, CAMP accumulates. When CAMP accumulates, testosterone production increases. Studies published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences and Molecular Pharmacology have demonstrated that phosphodiesterase controls testosterone production in Leydig cells through exactly this mechanism. The more CAMP survives, the more testosterone the cell produces. A human clinical trial, published in the International Journal of Medical Sciences in 2022, tested a cacao pomegranate extract blend, standardized for theobromine, on 120 men. Free testosterone increased 48.28%. Total testosterone increased 24.56%. Follow the chain. Theobromine dilates blood vessels. Blood flows faster with less resistance. At the same time, theobromine inhibits the enzyme that suppresses testosterone production. Testosterone rises. Testosterone suppresses hepcidin. Hepcidin drops. Iron floods the bloodstream. Red blood cells proliferate. Hemoglobin concentrations climb. The blood, already flowing faster through dilated vessels, is now carrying more iron-loaded oxygen to every muscle, every organ, every cell. The Aztec warrior drinks cacao before battle. Blood vessels open. Testosterone spikes. Iron mobilizes. The oxygen-carrying capacity of every red blood cell surges as his cardiovascular system accelerates the delivery of Mars's metal through every tissue in his body. He is dosing Mars into Mars. The heart, blood, Yolotl Estli is pharmacology and mythology at once, inseparable. The Aztecs didn't need to know the word for phosphodiesterase. They watched what cacao did to warriors and built a cosmology around what they saw. The tree of the south grows in the land of the dead because cacao sends iron-rich blood surging through the body of a man about to make corpses. There was a ritual. The sources call it Itzpacalatl, water from the washing of obsidian blades. Before certain sacrificial rites, Aztec priests prepared a cacao drink mixed with the blood of previous sacrifices, washed from the obsidian blades, perhaps with additional unnamed substances. The victim drank this mixture. If the man chosen to die was not dancing joyfully enough on the eve of his sacrifice, the priests gave him itzpakalatl, and it returned him to a state of cheerful obedience. He danced his way to the top of the pyramid. The name tells you what it was. Itzpakalatl, obsidian, volcanic glass, the sharpest material the Mesoamerican world possessed, the substance of sacrificial knives, water, the medium that carries life. The blood entered the drink through the blades. The priests washed the knives that had killed the last victim, and the water that ran off those blades, carrying whatever remains of the dead, was mixed with cacao and given to the next to die. He consumed the blood of the dead, combined with the blood of the gods. Human iron dissolved in divine Theobromine. The hemoglobin of the previously slain carried into the bloodstream of the next to die, inside a drink that would dilate his vessels, inhibit his phosphodiesterase, and let the full cascade run. Iron feeding iron, Mars feeding Mars. The pharmacology and the theology fused into a single liquid, named in Nahuatl, administered by priests, and swallowed by a man who would be dead before the sun moved. In 1938, a man named Forrest Mars Sr. was traveling through Spain during the Civil War. He watched soldiers eating chocolate pellets coated in a hard sugar shell. The shell prevented the chocolate from melting in the heat. The chocolate gave the soldiers quick energy. Mars, who had grown up in the candy business, his father Frank had founded Mars Incorporated in 1911, recognized what he was seeing. A delivery system, a portable, heat-resistant method for getting chocolate into the bodies of men at war. He went home and created M&Ms. The candy debuted in 1941, the year the United States entered World War II. The entire early production run went to the US military. Soldiers carried M&Ms in their rations across Europe and the Pacific. The original marketing slogan was direct, melts in your mouth, not in your hand. The product solved a logistics problem, chocolate for combat conditions. Mars Incorporated ran advertisements during the war, declaring it was now 100% at war. The company that bears the war god's name, patented in the month named after the war god, created a chocolate product for soldiers at war. Theobromine, the compound that dilates blood vessels, mobilizes testosterone, and floods the system with iron-loaded hemoglobin, delivered in a shell designed for battlefield conditions. The Aztec warriors' cacao ration, industrialized, mass-produced, shipped in crates to men who would kill and die with Mars's chemistry running through their veins. Whether Forrest Mars Sr. knew he was replicating a Mesoamerican practice is a question no one has thought to ask. What is documented is the convergence. Cacao, given to warriors before combat, 5 centuries and an ocean apart. Mars Incorporated is headquartered in McLean, Virginia. McLean, a quiet suburb of Washington, D.C., also home to the Central Intelligence Agency, whose headquarters sits in McLean's Langley neighborhood. Also home to Booz Allen Hamilton, the consulting firm that employed Edward Snowden when he exposed the NSA's surveillance apparatus. Also home to Capital One. SAIC, the defense technology integrator, operated from McLean for years before relocating to nearby Reston in 2017. The entire Fairfax County corridor functions as a dense cluster of defense and intelligence contractors whose work the public rarely sees. Mars Inc. is one of the largest privately held companies in the world. Annual revenue over $50 billion. The Mars family, descendants of Forrest Sr., is among the wealthiest families on Earth, and the company is famously aggressively private. No public stock, minimal press engagement. Executives rarely give interviews. The internal culture has been described as more secretive than the intelligence agencies down the road. They own Mars bars, M&Ms, Snickers, Twix, Milky Way, Skittles. They own Pedigree, Whiskers and Royal Canin, dominant brands in pet food. They own Wrigley's. They are, by some measures, the largest candy company and one of the largest food companies on the planet. And they source their cacao from West Africa. Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana produce roughly 60% of the world's cacao. The supply chain runs through smallholder farms where, according to a 2020 study commissioned by the US Department of Labor, approximately 1.56 million children work in cacao farming, many of them performing hazardous labor. Hazardous labor includes wielding machetes to harvest cacao pods, carrying heavy loads, and exposure to agrochemicals. Some of these children are trafficked from neighboring countries. In 2001, Mars was among the companies whose CEOs personally signed the Harkin-Engel Protocol, an industry agreement committing to eliminate the worst forms of child labor from cocoa production by 2005. The deadline was missed. It was extended to 2008. Missed again. In 2010, the chocolate industry again delayed the implementation date, this time until 2020, and also changed the goal to reducing child labor by only 70%, instead of eradicating it. By 2020, child labor in cocoa had increased. As of 2025, no major chocolate company has met its commitments. Children harvesting cacao pods with machetes. The pods containing the beans that produce theobromine, the compound that mobilizes iron in the blood, the iron forged in stellar death, carried by hemoglobin, governed by testosterone. Mars's metal, harvested by children's hands, processed into candy that generates tens of billions annually for a company named after the god of war, headquartered in the shadow of the CIA, selling a product originally designed for soldiers. Every layer is present. The dead planet's iron, the blood's hemoglobin, the warrior's drink, the god's name on the building. There is a word for what happens when a sacred substance is extracted from its ritual container and mass-produced without any of the mythology, the initiation, the reverence, or the cost that originally accompanied it. The alchemists would recognize the process. The prima materia was destroyed. The blackening happened, but the opus was never completed. No purification followed. No rebirth, just the reduction, and then the factory line. Cacao was a sacrament. It was prepared ritually. It was consumed in specific contexts, before battle, during ceremony, as an offering to the dead. The Aztecs understood that they were ingesting something powerful, something connected to blood and death and the directional cosmology of their universe. The drink had a liturgy, it had a theology, it had boundaries. What Mars Incorporated sells is cacao stuck in the blackening. The chemistry remains. Theobromine is still present in every M&M, every Snickers bar, every bag of Maltesers. The compound still dilates your blood vessels, still inhibits phosphodiesterase, still nudges the hormonal cascade that mobilizes iron. Your body still responds to the same chemistry that the Aztec warrior's body did. The pharmacology has not changed. Everything else has. The ritual container is gone. The awareness is gone. The reciprocity, the understanding that you are consuming something of power, something that demands respect, something connected to forces larger than your appetite, dissolved the moment cacao became a commodity. You eat a Snickers bar at a gas station or after a busy day. The theobromine enters your bloodstream. Your vessels dilate. Your body begins the cascade. You feel a small lift, a minor warmth, a fleeting satisfaction. You throw the wrapper in the trash. The Aztec would recognize the chemistry. He would recognize nothing else. Remember all of this, the iron forged in stellar death, the hemoglobin it builds, the testosterone that governs it, the theobromine that accelerates it, the civilization that encoded the biochemistry into ritual, the corporation that stripped the ritual and kept the chemistry, the children who harvest the raw material, the god whose name is on the building. We have traced Mars from the sky into the blood, and from the blood into the cup. Every layer is present in every subsequent layer. The recursive structure is the point. Mars is one force expressing through multiple registers: cosmic, biological, pharmacological, economic, mythological, and every register amplifies the others. The next layer will show what happens when that force is weaponized at industrial scale. When Mars is severed from mythology entirely and installed in institutions that answer to no temple, no code of honor, and no electorate. The Kabbalists had a name for this. They called it Golachab. Golachab. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the Tree of Life maps 10 emanations, Sephiroth, through which the divine expresses itself into creation. Each sephira represents a quality of God made manifest. The fifth sephira is Geburah, severity, judgment, the necessary force that prunes, limits, constrains, and when required, destroys. Geburah is Mars on the tree of life. Every sephira has a shadow. The Kabbalists called these shadows the clifoth, the husks, the shells, the empty forms that remain when a divine quality is severed from its balancing opposite. The shadow of Geburah is Golachab, the burners with fire. Geburah is the surgeon's scalpel. Golachab is the scalpel that keeps cutting after the tumor is removed. Geburah is Tyr's hand in the wolf's mouth. Severity in service of cosmic order, severity that costs the one who wields it. Golachab is the severity that serves only itself, force without wisdom, judgment without mercy, the war god unmoored from every principle that once gave war meaning. On the tree of life, Geburah sits directly across from chest, mercy, loving kindness. They balance each other. Severity without mercy becomes cruelty. Mercy without severity becomes indulgence. The entire architecture of the tree depends on this tension. Pull one sephira out of the relationship with its counterpart, and the system collapses into its shadow. Golachab is what happens when Mars is extracted from the tree. The divine name assigned to Geburah is Elohim Gibor, God the mighty warrior, the name that the Kabbalists understood as the voice of God when God acts through severity. When Elohim Gibor speaks, forests fall, empires end, the surgeon cuts. The name carries the full weight of divine violence operating within divine law. This is the name the tradition trusts because it answers to the names above it on the tree. The angelic order of Geburah is the seraphim, the burning ones. In Isaiah's vision, 6 winged beings of fire attend the throne of God. 2 wings cover their faces because even angels cannot look directly at what they serve. 2 wings cover their feet because even the instruments of divine severity must veil their capacity for destruction. 2 wings carry them. They burn and they serve, and they do not burn for their own sake. The fire has a master. Golachab is what happens when the seraphim forget whose throne they attend, when the fire burns for itself, when Elohim Gibor is invoked by institutions that answer to no divine name, serve no cosmic order, and recognize no authority above their own quarterly earnings. Smedley Butler knew. Major General Smedley Darlington Butler, United States Marine Corps, 2-time Medal of Honor recipient. At the time of his death in 1940, the most decorated Marine in American history, he spent 34 years in active military service: the Philippines, China, Central America, Haiti, Nicaragua, France, the Boxer Rebellion, the Banana Wars, the First World War. And then he wrote a book. He called it War is a Racket. Published in 1935, 5 years before his death, not even 100 pages long. Butler laid out his thesis with the directness of a man who had spent 3 decades watching it from the inside. War is conducted for the profit of the few at the expense of the many. He named the companies. He named the profits. He described how corporations that manufactured munitions, ships, leather goods, and canned goods saw their revenues multiplied during wartime, while soldiers died for $30 a month. Butler wrote, "I helped make Mexico safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street." A 2-time Medal of Honor recipient calling himself a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. The most decorated Marine in the country, describing his own career as enforcement work for corporate interests. He published this in 1935. The military-industrial complex that Eisenhower would warn about in 1961 was already, by Butler's account, a mature system a quarter of a century earlier.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Butler also testified before Congress that he had been approached by a group of wealthy businessmen to lead a coup against Franklin Roosevelt, the so-called business plot of 1933.
I appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship. The plan as outlined to me was to form an organization of veterans, to use as a bluff, or as a club at least, to intimidate the government and break down our democratic institutions. The upshot of the whole thing was that I was supposed to lead an organization of 500,000 men, which would be able to take over the functions of government. I talked with an investigator for this committee who came to me with a subpoena on Sunday, November 18th. He told me they had unearthed evidence linking my name with several such veteran organizations. As it then seemed to me to be getting serious, I felt it was my duty to tell all I knew of such activities to this committee. My main interest in all this is to preserve our democratic institution. I want to retain the right to vote, the right to speak freely, and the right to write. If we maintain these basic principles, our democracy is safe. No dictatorship can exist with suffrage, freedom of speech, and press.
The McCormack-Dickstein Committee investigated and confirmed that the plot existed. The plotters were never prosecuted. Gebura becomes Golachab the moment the warrior realizes he has been serving interests he was never told about. Butler's career was Gebura: genuine severity, genuine sacrifice, genuine combat. His revelation was discovering that the system he served had been Golachab the entire time. The architecture of Golachab has a geography, and that geography has a center: the Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia, one of the largest office buildings on Earth, 5 sides, 5 rings, 5 floors above ground, 2 below. Built in 16 months during 1941 to 1943. Designed to house the entire War Department under one roof. 5. The number of Gebura on the Tree of Life, the 5th Sephira. The Pentagon is a 5-sided building housing the machinery of war, built on the 5th Sephira's number, located across the Potomac from a city whose geometry has long been read through Masonic symbolism. Whether the architects intended the correspondence is a question no one in an official capacity has ever been asked. The pattern is there. The Kabbalists would recognize it immediately. The Pentagon has never passed a financial audit. 8 consecutive failures from 2018 through 2025. The Department of Defense is the only major federal agency that has never achieved a clean audit opinion. In 2018, the first full audit ever attempted, some 1,200 auditors examined the Pentagon's books and found the records unauditable. Between 1998 and 2015, analysis of the Pentagon Inspector General's own reports revealed $21 trillion in accounting adjustments that could not be traced or documented. The Pentagon's comptroller says these are bookkeeping errors. Entries on both sides of the ledger, transfers counted multiple times. The Government Accountability Office found that 96% of system-generated accounting adjustments lacked adequate supporting documentation. The Pentagon has now failed 8 consecutive annual audits. It has never passed one. $886 billion. That was the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act. $886 billion flowing through an institution that cannot account for where its money goes. The 5th side of the building, the 5th Sephira's shadow, consuming wealth at a scale that defies comprehension and rendering that consumption invisible through the sheer volume of untrackable transactions. Golachab operates in plain sight. It burns so brightly that looking at it directly is impossible. The numbers are too large, the bureaucracy is too dense, the classification system is too layered. The information is technically public. The incomprehensibility is the camouflage. Jack Parsons stood at the threshold. John Whiteside Parsons, born Marvel. Whiteside Parsons in 1914, co-founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, pioneer of solid rocket fuel, one of the founding minds behind the American rocketry program that would eventually become NASA. He was also a devoted follower of Aleister Crowley, a practicing member of the Ordo Templi Orientis, and the man who performed the Babylon working in 1946, a series of ritual invocations in the Mojave Desert intended to incarnate a divine feminine force into physical reality. His ritual partner was L. Ron Hubbard, who would later found Scientology. Parsons died in a chemical explosion in his home laboratory in 1952. He was 37. The circumstances have been debated ever since. What matters for this essay is the pipeline. Parsons helped build JPL. JPL became a NASA center. The American rocket program that emerged from JPL and from Operation Paperclip, the post-war recruitment of German rocket scientists, including former Nazi Party members, became the foundation for the Apollo program, for the space shuttle, for the International Space Station, and eventually for the commercial space industry. Operation Paperclip brought Werner von Braun and over 1,600 other German scientists to the United States. Von Braun had designed the V-2 rocket using slave labor from the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp, where an estimated 20,000 prisoners died. He became the director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket that carried Apollo 11 to the moon. The pipeline runs from Parsons' occult rituals in the desert, through Nazi rocketry, through American aerospace, to the modern military-industrial complex. Every stage carries Mars: fire, propulsion, violence transmuted into exploration, severity operating at the boundary between creation and destruction. The mythology never left the engineering. The pipeline continued. Elon Musk founded SpaceX in 2002 with the stated goal of making humanity a multiplanetary species. The first successful destination, Mars. The company's stated purpose from inception has been to reach the red planet. SpaceX would build the vehicles. Mars would be the target. The war god's planet, colonized by rockets, descended from the engineering lineage of Parsons and von Braun. SpaceX launched Starshield in 2022, a classified satellite constellation designed for US national security applications. While Starlink provides civilian internet, Starshield serves the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies. The company that was going to take humanity to Mars now operates a military surveillance network in orbit. And then Castilian. In 2023, senior Starshield leaders left SpaceX and formed Castilian, a defense company building hypersonic weapons. Multiple co-founders had spent a decade or more at SpaceX, leading national security satellite programs and Earth observation development. By December 2025, Castilian had raised $350 million in Series B funding from Altimeter Capital and Lightspeed Venture Partners. Their facility, a 1,000-acre campus in New Mexico, the same state where the first atomic bomb was detonated at Trinity, where Goddard launched his rockets outside Roswell, where von Braun's captured V-2S were tested at White Sands, and where JPL's first missiles flew after Parsons was pushed out. Their production target, thousands of missiles per year. The pipeline from Parsons to Paperclip, to NASA, to SpaceX, to Starshield, to Castilian, terminates in hypersonic weapons named after a pirate. The trajectory is consistent, as every generation's Mars technology produces the next generation's weapons. Rocketry becomes intercontinental ballistic missiles, becomes satellite surveillance, becomes hypersonic kill vehicles. The fire only accelerates. Palantir announced in February 2026 that it moved its headquarters from Denver to Miami, Florida. It was founded in 2003 in Palo Alto, California, with deep ties to the intelligence community in McLean, Virginia, the same suburb where Mars Incorporated keeps its headquarters, the same suburb where the CIA keeps its. The company's name comes from Tolkien. In The Lord of the Rings, the Palantiri are seeing stones, ancient artifacts that allow their users to see across vast distances and communicate across space. They are instruments of surveillance. In the story, the Palantiri work exactly as designed. That is what makes them dangerous. Sauron uses them to deceive Saruman and nearly subverts Denethor. The seeing stones become instruments of manipulation. Whoever controls the stone controls the information. Whoever controls the information controls the war. Peter Thiel co-founded Palantir in 2003 with early funding from In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm. The company builds data analysis software for intelligence agencies, military organizations, and law enforcement. Palantir Gotham serves defense and intelligence clients. Palantir Foundry serves commercial clients. The company's software integrates, cross-references, and analyzes vast quantities of data: financial transactions, communications metadata, surveillance feeds, and biometric records. It identifies patterns and targets. Thiel named his company after a corrupted surveillance artifact from a story about the seductive nature of power. Whether this was self-aware irony or unconscious revelation, the naming is precise. Palantir builds seeing stones. Its primary customers are the institutions that wield Mars's force at a planetary scale. And the stones, as Tolkien warned, serve whoever holds them, which is rarely who you think. And then there is Lockheed Martin. The name carries Mars. Martin from Martinus, of Mars. The world's largest defense contractor. $67.6 billion in 2023 revenue. 73% from the US government alone. 92% from government customers worldwide. Lockheed Martin builds the F-35, the Aegis combat system, Trident submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and satellite systems for military reconnaissance. The company that carries the God's name in its corporate title is the single largest recipient of Pentagon spending. The F-35 Lightning II is their flagship product. One program, 2,456 aircraft, a lifetime the Pentagon estimates at $2.1 trillion over a 94-year life cycle, from 1994 to 2088. About half of that figure is projected inflation. But still, it's $2.1 trillion, the most expensive weapons program in human history. For context, the United States has spent approximately $1.8 trillion on NASA since its creation in 1958. Every shuttle launch, every Mars rover, every telescope pointed at the edge of the observable universe, the International Space Station, the Apollo program that put 12 men on the moon. All of it, over nearly 7 decades, cost less than a single fighter jet program. And the F-35 accounts for only 26% of Lockheed Martin's annual revenue. They build so much more. The corporation was formed in 1995 from the merger of Lockheed and Martin Marietta, but the history runs deeper. Between the late 1950s and the mid-1970s, Lockheed ran what amounted to a parallel diplomatic corps operating through bribery. $22 million in documented payoffs across Japan, the Netherlands, Italy, and West Germany. In Japan, Prime Minister Kakae Tanaka was arrested for accepting 500 million yen to steer airline contracts their way. The money was funneled through Yoshio Kodama, a Yakuza-connected ultranationalist. In the Netherlands, Prince Bernhard, husband of Queen Juliana and co-founder and chairman of the Bilderberg Group, accepted $1.1 million. When the investigation threatened prosecution, the Queen threatened to abdicate. Bernhard was spared. On his deathbed in 2004, he admitted taking the money. His words, "I have accepted that the word Lockheed will be carved on my tombstone." Between 1970 and 1975, Saudi arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi received $106 million in Lockheed commissions. He became, for all practical purposes, a marketing arm of Lockheed. In the words of Max Helzel, former vice president of Lockheed's international marketing, the scandal directly led to the enactment of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of 1977. The company survived only because the US government guaranteed $250 million in bank loans to keep it alive. The entity was too embedded to fail. Since 1995, Lockheed Martin has agreed to pay $676.8 million to settle 88 instances of misconduct, according to the Project on Government Oversight. They rank first among all US contractors for the number of misconduct incidents. Their shares are held primarily by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, the same institutional investors who appear as top shareholders in nearly every major corporation on Earth. The God of War's revenue stream flows upward into the same capital pools that own everything else. And now the convergence. Elon Musk, founder of SpaceX, which operates Starshield for the military, whose former executives now build hypersonic weapons at Castellion, was appointed to lead the Department of Government Efficiency in early 2025. DOGE, as it was nicknamed, was tasked with reviewing federal spending and recommending cuts. Musk's organization began reviewing the Pentagon's budget. The Pentagon that has failed 8 consecutive audits, which channels hundreds of billions annually to defense contractors, including SpaceX itself. A man whose companies hold classified military contracts is reviewing the spending of the agency that issues those contracts. This is the henhouse hiring the fox as its accountant. And this is the shape of Golachab in the 21st century. The warrior archetype has been privatized, extracted from collective mythology, from temples, from codes of honor, from the initiatory traditions that once gave Mars his meaning and his limits. In every culture we examined in the first layer, Greek, Roman, Norse, Vedic, Mesoamerican, Mars existed within a system. He had a place on the tree. He was balanced by other forces. The Spartans chained him. The Norse sacrificed a hand to bind the wolf. The Romans paired him with agriculture. The Aztecs embedded him in a cosmology of directional trees and ritual reciprocity. The modern military-industrial complex answers to none of these. The Pentagon answers to Congress in theory, to contractors in practice, and to its own internal bureaucracy in reality. SpaceX answers to Elon Musk, Castellion to its investors, Palantir to Peter Thiel and the intelligence agencies that fund it, Lockheed Martin to its shareholders. No temple governs them, no code constrains them. No elder stands at the threshold to tell Mars when to stop. And chest, mercy, loving kindness, the force that sits directly across the tree to hold Gebura in balance? She is absent, she is unfunded, she is unrepresented on any board of directors. And even worse, she is a victim in the Epstein files. Golachab, the burners with fire, severity severed from its opposite, force without wisdom. The scalpel that keeps cutting, the fire that has forgotten it was ever part of a hearth. Every layer is present. Mars's metal, forged in stellar death, is the raw material of every weapon these companies build, every missile they design, every satellite they launch. Steel is iron alloyed with carbon, Mars bound to the element the alchemists never named, though they knew its signatures everywhere. Black, primordial, the skeleton beneath all living structure. Had they isolated it, they would have given it to Saturn, and they would have recognized steel for what it is. The old marriage of Mars and Saturn, forged in fire. Soldiers carry hemoglobin loaded with that same iron into combat zones where these weapons are deployed. Mars Incorporated sits in McLean alongside the institutions that wield them, selling Theobromine in candy bars at every military base exchange worldwide. The sacrament persists, stripped of every meaning the Aztecs gave it. And above it all, the dead planet, the red corpse in the sky, rusted and scarred. The destination SpaceX says it is building toward. A dead world named after the god whose earthly institutions have been severed from every tradition that once made him something more than destruction. We have one layer left. The question it answers is the oldest one in the essay, planted in the image of a dead planet whose iron stopped churning. What would it mean to restart the core? Iron ore is useless. Pull it out of the ground and you have a lump of rock with metal trapped inside. It cannot cut, it cannot hold an edge, it cannot protect anything. Raw iron ore is potential without form, the same way a planet with a convecting core is potential without civilization. The same way testosterone flooding a teenager's bloodstream is potential without character. The ore must be smelted, heated to extreme temperatures in a furnace until the iron separates from the rock. The slag, the waste material, the impurities, floats to the surface and is scraped away. What remains is pig iron, purer than ore, still brittle, still useless for anything that matters. Pig iron must be refined. It comes out of the furnace loaded with carbon, nearly 5%, which makes it brittle and impossible to forge. To become steel, that carbon must be burned away until only a precise amount remains, between 0.02% and 2.1%. Too little and the metal stays soft, too much and it snaps under stress. The marriage of iron and carbon requires exact proportion, and that proportion was one of the most closely guarded secrets in the ancient world. Steel must be shaped, heated until it glows orange, then struck. Hammered on an anvil by a smith who knows where to hit, how hard, and how many times. The hammering compresses the grain structure of the metal, aligning its internal crystalline patterns, driving out air pockets and microfractures. Every blow reorganizes the steel at a microstructural level. The sword is being built from the inside out. Then quenching. The glowing steel is plunged into water, oil, or brine. The rapid cooling forces a new, harder structure to form, but it also makes the metal extremely hard and extremely brittle. A quenched blade will hold a devastating edge. It will also shatter on impact. Hardness without flexibility, severity without mercy, Geberah without chest. So the smith tempers, reheats the blade to a lower temperature, carefully, precisely, and lets it cool slowly. Tempering sacrifices some hardness in exchange for flexibility. The blade can now absorb impact without breaking. It can bend and return to its true form. The metal has learned to yield without surrendering. This is the full sequence: smelting, alloying, forging, quenching, tempering. Each stage transforms the metal's internal structure, and each demands heat, pressure, and the knowledge of when to stop. Skip a stage, and the metal fails. Rush one, and it fails differently. Apply too much force, and it shatters. The smith must understand the material deeply enough to bring it to its edge without pushing past it. The folded blades forged across the ancient world, from Japan to the Viking North, were heated, hammered flat, folded over, and hammered again. A dozen folds produced thousands of layers. The process created a blade with a visible wave pattern on its surface, the record of every fold, every heating, and every blow. The beauty of a folded blade is the visible history of its own transformation. The pattern is the proof that the metal endured its forging. There is a god whose sole purpose is this work, Hephaestus, the Greek god of the forge, son of Hera, lame from birth or from being thrown off Olympus, depending on which source you trust, the crippled god, the ugly god, the only Olympian who works with his hands. While Ares screamed and bled and ran to daddy, Hephaestus stood at the anvil and made things. He forged the armor of Achilles. He forged the shield that carried the entire world on its surface, described by Homer in over 100 lines of the Iliad. He forged the chains that bound Prometheus. He forged the golden net that caught Ares in bed with his own wife Venus, and held them there for every god on Olympus to see. That image deserves attention. The smith catches the warrior in a net. The god who shapes metal traps the god of war. Hephaestus defeats Ares through craft, through patience, through the precise application of skill to material. The forge god masters the war god the same way the forge masters raw iron, by knowing it better than it knows itself, by understanding where it is weak, and by applying the right constraint at the right moment. The Romans called him Vulcan. His forge sat beneath volcanoes. The Latin word for volcano comes from his name. The fire that shapes civilization and the fire that erupts from the earth share the same source. Every ancient smith god carries the same lesson, that the one who gives Mars his form is not a warrior. He is a craftsman, he's often wounded, he's never glamorous, and he is indispensable. Because without him iron remains ore, aggression remains chaos, and the sword is never forged. Every traditional culture had a forge for Mars. The specifics varied, the principle held. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, the community subjected its young men to an ordeal, a controlled encounter with fear, pain, endurance, and death. And the ones who survived emerged transformed, initiated, forged. The Spartans had the agoj, boys removed from their families at age 7, trained in combat, endurance, stealth, and pain tolerance for 23 years. At the end, for the most capable, the Crypteia, the secret service, in which selected young men were sent into the countryside alone, armed with a knife, required to survive by their own capacity, and according to Plutarch, to kill helots who were out after dark. The program was brutal. It was also, within its cultural context, a forge. The boy's raw Mars, his aggression, his fear, his drive to dominate was heated, hammered, quenched, and tempered by elders who had survived the same process. The product was a Spartan warrior, someone whose violence had been given form by a community that understood the cost of unformed violence. The Maasai of East Africa practiced eunoto, the ceremony that graduated warriors out of the warrior phase. Young men who had spent years as Moran, warriors, living in the bush, proving themselves through endurance and discipline, were shaved by their mothers and welcomed back into the community in a new role. The ceremony acknowledged that the warrior phase was a stage, with an entrance and an exit. Mars had a container. The fire was lit, allowed to burn, and then banked deliberately, ritually, so the man could carry its heat into the next phase of life without being consumed by it. Indigenous Australian cultures used initiation rites that lasted weeks or months, involving isolation, fasting, scarification, instruction by elders, and encounters with ancestral spirits through ceremony. The initiate died symbolically. The boy was killed so the man could be born. The death was real enough to reorganize the psyche. The rebirth was witnessed by the entire community, which meant the man's new identity was held by collective recognition, reinforced by everyone he would live among for the rest of his life. In the Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece, the most revered initiation rites in the Western world for nearly 2,000 years, participants underwent a multi-day ritual that included fasting, a procession, the drinking of Cacao, a barley drink of uncertain composition, descent into darkness, and a final revelation in the Testosterone at Eleusis. The content of the revelation was secret. What we know is its effect. Participants consistently reported that the experience transformed their relationship to death. They emerged without the fear that had governed them before. Cicero wrote that the mysteries gave initiates not only to live with joy, but also to die with a better hope. Phobos, fear, was addressed directly. The initiate walked into it, through it, and came out the other side holding a different relationship to the force that had once paralyzed them. Modern civilization dismantled the forge. The process was gradual. Industrialization moved men from land to factories, breaking the apprenticeship structures that had transmitted craft knowledge, including the craft of becoming a man, from elder to youth. Urbanization dispersed extended families and separated generations. 2 world wars killed millions of men who would have been the initiating elders for the next generation. The ones who returned carried trauma. They had no framework to process, and no community ritual to metabolize. They went silent. Their sons grew up in that silence. The therapeutic revolution of the mid-20th century reframed aggression as pathology. Anger became a symptom. Conflict became dysfunction. The DSM categorized the expressions of unforged Mars, such as conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, and intermittent explosive disorder, as conditions to be managed, medicated, and suppressed. The medical system, operating with genuine concern for public safety, applied diagnostic categories to behavior that traditional cultures would have recognized as the raw material of initiation. The fire that needed a forge was treated as a fire that needed extinguishing. Schools enforced the message with zero-tolerance policies, mandatory conflict resolution, the elimination of rough play and competitive hierarchies, and physical risk. Boys who showed too much Mars energy were flagged, referred, and evaluated. The body's testosterone surges, beginning at puberty, peaking in the late teens, flooding the system with iron-mobilizing hormones, preparing the organism for exactly the kind of intensity that initiation provides, arrived on schedule. The container that was supposed to receive them had been demolished decades earlier. And while the forge was being dismantled, the iron itself began to thin. Population-level studies have documented a generational decline in testosterone that cannot be explained by aging alone. A 2007 study in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, led by Thomas Travison at the New England Research Institutes, found that American men's testosterone levels dropped by roughly 1% per year from 1987 through 2004, independent of age, BMI, or health status. A man born in 1970 had measurably less testosterone at 30 than a man born in 1940 had at the same age. The decline is generational. Something in the environment, in the endocrine disruptors in plastics and pesticides, in the sedentary architecture of modern work, in the chronic stress patterns of economies designed for extraction rather than craft, is suppressing Mars at the hormonal level. The forge was demolished, and the ore quality dropped simultaneously. The result is a generation of men carrying forging temperature iron with no anvil, no hammer, and no smith, and no father. Mars was the father of Rome. This is the detail the modern reading skips past on its way to the war stories. Mars did not only fight, he fathered. He sired the founders. He was present at the origin, and his presence was paternal. The Romans worshipped him as their ancestor, the divine father from whom the capacity for civilization descended. Every forge in every culture required an older man to operate it. The Spartan agoge was run by elders who had survived it. The Maasai Unoto was conducted by mothers and witnessed by the entire community. But the years of warrior training that preceded it were guided by Senior Moran, who had already passed through. Aboriginal initiation was administered by initiated men. The forge requires a smith. The smith is the father, or the man who stands where the father should be. The modern West has produced a generation of fatherless boys at a scale no previous civilization has attempted. In the United States, roughly 1 in 4 children lives without a biological father in the home. The data on outcomes is unambiguous and has been replicated across decades of sociological research. Fatherless boys are statistically more likely to drop out of school, enter the criminal justice system, struggle with substance abuse, and die by suicide. The iron arrives on schedule, the testosterone surges, the organism prepares for the forge, and the smith is not there. He left, or was never present, or is present, but so broken by his own unforged Mars that he has nothing to transmit except his silence. The father who cannot model healthy aggression produces a son who cannot access his own. The father who rages without form produces a son who fears his own fire. The father who is absent produces a son who searches for Mars in every authority figure, ideology, or social media that promises to tell him what a man is. The forge requires a smith. A generation without smiths does not produce unforged metal. It produces metal that forges itself in whatever heat it can find and whatever shape accident provides. The iron does what unforged iron always does. It rusts. Depression. The clinical data is consistent across Western nations. Men die by suicide at roughly 3 to 4 times the rate of women. In the United States, men account for nearly 80% of all suicides, according to the CDC, National Vital Statistics System. The sharpest increase took place over 2 decades. Middle-aged men, 45, 64, whose suicide rate climbed nearly 50% between 1999 and 2018. Precisely the age range where traditional cultures would have completed the transition from warrior to elder, where the fire would have been fully tempered, where the man would have received his role as the one who initiates the next generation. That role is empty. The middle-aged man in the modern West has been a warrior for no cause, initiated by no elder, and witnessed by no community. His Mars energy, the same force that carried iron through his bloodstream, that built his muscle and bone density, that gave him the drive to build and protect and compete, has had no container for decades. The iron corrodes. The depression is the rust. Addiction, alcohol, pornography, gambling, video games, social media. Every single one is a surrogate forge. They provide a temporary simulation of the intensity that initiation would have provided, the altered state, the risk, the sense of being fully alive for a few hours. And they leave the iron exactly where it was, unforged. The heat comes and goes. The metal never transforms. Fragments of the forge survive. They survive in places the culture does not always recognize as sacred, because the culture has forgotten what sacred means in this context. A Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym at 6 in the morning, a boxing ring in a basement, a wrestling room where the weights have been inherited 3 times. These are forges. The body is subjected to controlled ordeal. Fear is confronted directly. The practitioner meets someone who can hurt them and must find their own capacity under pressure. The belt system, where it exists, functions as a visible record of transformation, the way the wave pattern on a folded blade records every fold. A black belt is a scar that earned its beauty. Team sports carry a reduced version of the same architecture, the discipline of training, the subordination of individual impulse to collective purpose, the confrontation with failure in public, the requirement to perform under pressure with consequences. A football pitch on a cold Tuesday night is not the Spartan agoge, But the boy whose body is flooded with testosterone and iron-rich blood and adrenal fire, who runs and hits and falls and rises and learns that his body can withstand more than he believed, is receiving a dose of what initiation once provided. The container is imperfect. It is also, for millions of boys, the only container they will ever encounter. Physical craft operates through the same channel: the apprentice carpenter, the trainee welder, and the student mechanic. The hand that learns to shape material by working with it every day, that develops calluses and precision, and the patience to do the same operation 1,000 times until it is right, is being forged. The material is forging the craftsman as much as the craftsman is forging the material. Hephaestus understood this. The smith and the iron transform together. Men today rage without direction: road rage, internet rage, political rage, the comment section as battlefield, the partisan identity as tribal affiliation. Men who have never been initiated into a genuine warrior tradition adopt the aesthetics of combat, the language, the postures, and the tribal markers, without any of the discipline, sacrifice, or accountability that traditional warrior cultures demanded. They perform Mars without embodying him, the form without the forge. And the body, always the body, chronic inflammation. Cardiovascular disease, the leading killer of men worldwide, is the failure of the very system that Mars governs: iron, blood, hemoglobin, and the heart. Autoimmune conditions are rising across all demographics. The immune system, Mars at the cellular level, is attacking the body it was designed to protect. Golachab is in the tissues. The alchemists described the entire process. They called the first stage nigredo, the blackening, the decomposition of the raw material. Everything the initiate believed about himself must die. His comfortable identity, his childhood self-image, his mother's version of who he is, all of it enters the furnace and burns black. This is the death phase, the symbolic killing, the descent. The Eleusinian initiate entering darkness, the Maasai warrior being shaved, the Spartan boy taken from his family, the ore entering the smelter. The second stage, albedo, the whitening, purification, the slag separated from the metal. The initiate, having lost his old identity, encounters his own raw material for the first time. He sees what he actually is beneath the persona. The white phase is clarifying and terrifying in equal measure, because the persona had been protecting him from the intensity of his own nature. The third stage, citrinitas, the yellowing, sometimes omitted in later alchemical texts, sometimes merged with the final stage, the dawning of a new consciousness, the first integration. The initiate begins to reassemble his identity around what survived the fire. The metal, purged of slag, begins to take shape under the hammer. The final stage, rubedo, the reddening, the completion of the great work, the philosopher's stone, the metal fully forged. The alchemists called this completion the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of opposites. The king and the queen unite. In the canonical texts, they are Sol and Luna, gold and silver, consciousness and unconscious. In the Kabbalah, they are Gebura and Chist, severity and mercy. In this essay, they are Mars and Venus, iron and chlorophyll, the molecule that carries oxygen and the molecule that releases it. The framework is the same. The principle never changes. Two forces that appear to oppose each other reveal themselves as halves of a single process, and the great work is their union. The warrior who has been forged by severity and tempered by compassion. The iron that flows and protects and generates a field. Red, the color of Mars, the color of iron oxide, the color of blood, the color of the completed alchemical work. The alchemists encoded the initiation sequence into their laboratory practice. The metallurgy was real. They were working with actual metals, actual furnaces, and actual chemical reactions. And the metallurgy was simultaneously a map of psychological transformation. The external process mirrored the internal one, as above, so below. The iron in the crucible and the iron in the blood undergo the same stages of refinement. Return to the dead planet. Mars's iron core stopped churning. The dynamo collapsed. The magnetic field disappeared. The atmosphere was stripped away. The oceans evaporated. The surface oxidized. Everything rusted. The planet that once had all the conditions for life became a monument to its own death. The largest corpse in the inner solar system, visible from Earth as a red point in the night sky. We have spent this entire essay tracing what Mars means: the god, the element, the hormone, the sacrament, the institution, the weapon, the shadow. Every register of Mars has been examined, and the same pattern recurs. When Mars has a container, a mythology, a ritual, a code, or a forge, he builds civilizations, binds chaos, carries oxygen, feeds courage, and generates the field that protects life. When Mars loses his container, when the ritual is stripped away, the initiation demolished, the code abandoned, the forge dismantled, he rusts. He turns inward. He attacks what he was meant to protect. Golachab enters the scene. The planet is the prophecy. Mars shows you what happens to iron that stops moving. Your iron has not stopped. It is circulating through your bloodstream right now. 25 trillion red blood cells, each one carrying roughly 270 million hemoglobin molecules, each hemoglobin molecule built around 4 atoms of iron forged in the death of a star billions of years ago. Testosterone governs its flow. Theobromine modulates the vessels that carry it. Your sympathetic nervous system stands ready to flood your muscles with the oxygen that iron delivers the moment you choose to act. Every layer we have traced lives in your body simultaneously. The stellar iron, the meteoritic metal from heaven, the hemoglobin chlorophyll mirror, the testosterone hepcidin cascade, the theobromine pathway, the fight-or-flight architecture, the suppression scars, the shadow channels, all of it, present, running, waiting. The dead planet's iron core stopped churning because something gave out. The internal dynamo, the circulation that generated the magnetic field that held the atmosphere that sustained the conditions for life, failed. What remained was a planet-sized ball of iron sitting still, rusting in silence, while the mightiest volcano in the solar system did nothing on its surface. The analogy writes itself, and that is why I will resist writing it for you. You already know whether your iron is spinning or rusting. You already know whether your Mars has a forge or is running raw through channels it was never meant to occupy. You already know whether the fire inside you is being shaped by something worthy of its heat, or whether it is corroding in the silence left behind by the forges that were never built for your generation. The Spartans chained Ares in the temple. The Norse sacrificed a hand to bind the wolf. The Romans paired Mars with the plough. The Aztecs embedded cacao in a cosmology that honored what it cost. The alchemists encoded the transformation in 4 colors, black, white, yellow, and red, and spent lifetimes following the sequence. Every culture that understood Mars built a container for Mars. The ones that lost the container lost the ability to distinguish Geburah from Golachab, the surgeon's scalpel from the blade that keeps cutting, the warrior who protects from the machine that consumes. The forge is yours to build. No one is coming to build it for you. The elders are gone or silent or broken by the same absence. The institutions that carry Mars's name, Mars Inc., Lockheed Martin, and the Pentagon, have taken the god's fire and industrialized it for profit. They will sell you chocolate with theobromine and weapons with iron and surveillance with seeing stones, and they will do it without any of the mythology, the reverence, or the reciprocity that once kept the fire from consuming everything it touched. Your iron is still here, the same element, forged in stellar death, fallen from heaven, carried in your blood, governed by hormones, accelerated by alkaloids, shaped by every choice you make about what you do with the force that lives inside you. Mars is a corpse in the sky, a god in the blood, a sacrament in the cup, a machine on the assembly line, a shadow in the body, and a forge if you build one.